Hello, I'm Shank, and this is the Hot Wheels Sleeper PC. It's a current, absolutely top-of-the-line gaming PC crammed into the infamous 90s computer case. But what's even crazier than this monstrosity is the story of how I wound up building it. It all started with a phone call from my friend Kale. Hello?
You have to come to this.
Kale told me a story of an old computer warehouse called Computer Reset, whose owner had been collecting computer hardware for decades. However, due to declining health of the owner, the warehouse was being liquidated. I wasn't much into retro computing, but the warehouse was full of CRT monitors, something I am very much into. Upon my adventures digging through the warehouse, I acquired many of the CRTs I was looking for, but also something I wasn't looking for.
Check it out, there was also a Hot Wheels computer or two lying around. Somebody else picked that up.
It was me. I grabbed it. And I began to wonder. The Hot Wheels computer was sold as a set. Could the Hot Wheels CRT, one of the 2 tubes on my CRT bucket list, be here too? Well, I didn't find the Hot Wheels CRT, or any Hot Wheels accessories for that matter. In a desperate, last-ditch effort, I made sure everyone there was aware I was on the hunt for the blue, flame-engulfed monitor. They said they would let me know if they found one, but you know how that goes. When I got home, I opened up the Hot Wheels PC to discover that the motherboard was completely corroded and beyond repair. Since restoring it was not an option, I opted to give it new life as a sleeper gaming PC. My budget for the project at the time was thin, so I began accumulating scrap parts. A mini ITX board, an older mid-range processor, and a sketchy power supply from Goodwill. With these parts in hand, I bit the bullet to buy the remaining parts, spending around $300 on a GTX 1650 Super graphics card, 16 gigs of RAM, and a low-profile cooler. I got to work assembling it, with the only required modification being cutting out a hole in the back of the removable frame for the GPU. And with an afternoon of work, I had an older mid-range computer and a Hot Wheels chassis with no accessories. Not something cool enough for a video, but at least it... Well, it turns out word about my hunt for the Hot Wheels CRT got around. Not one, but 2 members of the DFW retro computing community had Hot Wheels CRTs for me. Abraham had a monitor and a keyboard for me, while David had a second monitor and a palm rest. Rather than making a video, I decided I would unveil it at LTX 2020, where I had been invited as a featured guest. But then this, thing happened in 2020 and plans changed. Nevertheless, I continued to keep my eyes out for other Hot Wheels computer parts, slowly working my way towards a complete set. But things really got interesting when I received another message from David, who had a very special surprise for me. As some of you may know, the Hot Wheels PC had a sister, and her name is Barbie. David hooked me up with a Barbie PC and monitor, along with the original box and much of the original documentation. With both the Hot Wheels and the Barbie PC, walking away from this was no longer an option. And while neither was a complete set, I was on my way there as I tracked down more and more parts. I was convinced nothing was going to stand in my way of getting the missing parts. That is, until one Friday when I was watching the WAN show.
Do you want to do the bounty now? We got a bounty,
Yes,
ladies and gentlemen. This is the Hot Wheels PC. I want to do a video. I've actually wanted to do a video about it for a long time. There's also a Barbie PC, and I'll accept either. I will give you $5,000 for a full set. $5K.
I reached out through Twitter and email, offering to lend them mine for the video. But it was too late. People who own these parts now believed, because a single YouTuber was willing to pay $5,000 for one, that everyone was willing to pay that much. Listing prices skyrocketed and have stayed there ever since, despite the fact that nobody is actually buying them. These PCs really aren't that rare, but are rarely sold on eBay due to their large size. At this point, I felt pretty defeated. There was no way I was going to be able to afford to buy the remaining parts at the newly inflated prices and buy the computer parts to make a sleeper. The project was dead. That is, until Micro Center caught wind of what I was trying to do. Not only did they want in, but they wanted me to crank it to 11. They offered to supply the parts for 2 PCs and told me they wanted to help me make the builds as crazy as possible. I was intrigued and took it upon myself to see just how absurd I could make the parts list before they said no. They didn't. So, armed with a new $7,000 shopping list, I hopped in my car and headed to Micro Center to take on my first ever big budget project. For the uninitiated, Micro Center is a computer retail store that's basically a haven for nerds. The store is just aisles and aisles of cool stuff, and more than just computers. They have a whole maker section with supplies and tools like 3D printers and soldering equipment. But by far, my favorite part about Micro Center is their massive computer component selection.
I'm looking for a keyboard that says, "I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie world."
Funny enough, back when I used to work for one of Micro Center's now defunct competitors, I still purchased my CPU and motherboard from Micro Center because their prices were lower than my employee discount. They have an online PC builder tool to easily make a list of compatible parts available for same-day in-store pickup. Or, for an added fee, you can have a technician assemble the parts into a gaming rig for you. Micro Center also has a promotion where, if you walk into the store with a coupon, they'll give you a free 128 gig flash drive with no purchase necessary. I'll have a link to that coupon in the description.
You're right. I don't think it's gonna all fit. Do you think you could pick me up in the Jeep?
But before we get to work assembling this monster, first let's take a look at the Hot Wheels PC case itself. And more importantly, why building a high-performance gaming PC inside of one of these is not a walk in the park. To open the computer, first we need to remove these screws. Then, the main chassis slides right out. This metal frame houses all the computer parts, while the Hot Wheels body is just a shell that slides over it. Right off the bat, you can see there is not a lot of space to work with. Unplug some cables, remove a few screws, and the floppy drive tray slides right out. This tray holds the floppy drive and 2 3.5-inch hard drives. 2 more cables, 4 more screws, and the CD-ROM drive slides right out. The motherboard is mounted to a metal plate on the back, which, after removing 2 screws, slides right out. This plate has screw mounts for mini ITX and mini GTX motherboards. Anything larger will not fit. The power supply is like a weird SFX power supply, with mounting ports on the short side rather than the long side. The Hot Wheels power supplies were infamous for their high failure rate, which was supposedly so bad, it led to the company producing these PCs to going bankrupt. And to be honest, pretty much everything about this computer's design and construction is pretty awful. Finally, we gotta talk about the fan. This single 80mm case fan is mounted to the only case fan port on the entire PC. That's right, the only place to put a case fan is a single 80mm exhaust port. What's even worse is the air intake. When assembled, the only place for air to get into the PC is through these 2 tiny slits in the front and a small grate under the case. Modern, high-performance computers produce a lot of heat, and that heat needs to be dissipated for the computer to work properly. Dissipating all that heat with such restricted airflow is going to be a nightmare, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Now that we know what we're dealing with, let's get to work. For the CPU, I'm using a top-of-the-line 16-core 32-thread Ryzen 9. I paired it with a Gigabyte mini ITX motherboard and 64 gigs of RAM, the maximum supported by the 2 DIMM slots. For the boot drive, I went with 2 Samsung 980 Pro drives for 4 terabytes of total storage configured in RAID 0. For the cooler, the first thing I went with was the Noctua NH-L9A low-profile air cooler. For the GPUs on these builds, Micro Center hooked me up with an EVGA RTX 3060 for each of them. This is the biggest card I can possibly fit without a custom water cooling loop, something I'm currently not comfortable doing on my own. To say this was a tight fit would be a complete understatement. Once I removed the heat shroud, I had less than 1 millimeter of clearance to work with. They won't be the happiest graphics cards given the tight space, but at least they fit. As for the power supply, I went with a Corsair 750 watt SFX modular power supply. But problems arose when I went to install. Long story short, the modular connectors created clearance issues against the cooler. This means I either had to find a different power supply or a different cooler. I reached out to the small form factor PC Discord server for help, and after careful measurement, we concluded that a 92mm liquid cooler radiator might possibly just barely fit, maybe? 92mm all-in-one liquid coolers are pretty niche, and they definitely aren't designed for cooling a CPU this power hungry. Once they sent me a link to a boutique that carried them, I immediately ordered 2. While waiting for the cooler to arrive, I got to work tearing down or shucking these 2 14TB external drives to reuse the hard drives inside. Depending on the hard drive, shucking can be a much more affordable way to get a great high-capacity drive. Mine had white label 7200 RPM helium-filled enterprise drives, which is pretty neat. I installed them in the floppy drive bay, giving me 28 terabytes of additional hard drive storage. To get the floppy drive working, I purchased a simple USB to floppy adapter. To save space, I replaced the connector with a direct solder connection and replaced the USB connector with a connector to plug directly into the motherboard. I can confirm that the floppy drive works, but this is the only floppy disk I have and I don't feel comfortable opening its contents. Once my cooler arrived, it was time to rebuild the PC. This time I was using a fancier Asus motherboard and the new CPU liquid cooler. After lots of finagling, I was able to get both the liquid cooler and the power supply installed. And I genuinely cannot believe how close this was to not fitting. The bottom wall of the case, CPU radiator, graphics card, CD tray, and top wall of the case are all butt up against each other with no clearance. If this case was even a millimeter shorter, I don't know what I would have done. Finally, we have the CD drive. Frequent viewers of my channel know I am not a fan of optical drives. But since this isn't a portable, battery-powered project, I'm willing to make an exception. While I could have used the original CD drive, I wanted to take things a little further and pack in a Blu-ray drive instead. Micro Center loved the idea and overnight shipped me 2 Blu-ray burners without a second thought. And after a little bit of painting, I had a matching Blu-ray burner for each computer. So, after routing power and data for everything, I powered it up, tweaked the BIOS, installed Windows, and got to work testing. I ran the Shadow of the Tomb Raider benchmark on default settings, and as I suspected, the cooling was nowhere near adequate. Both the CPU and GPU were pegged at over 90 degrees Celsius. That is way, way too hot. Running the chips at those temperatures continuously will eventually toast them. But fortunately, I had a backup plan. Allow me to introduce my brute force solution. Some call it the PFR0912XHE. Some call it the Blowimatron. But no matter what you call it, there's no denying its ability to go brr. Alright, here we go. This fan is rated to draw 4.5 amps, which is over 20 times the power of the premium Noctua I was using before. The blades are rated to spin at 11,000 RPM with a dangerous amount of force. I expected these fans to move a lot of air, but I was blown away by just how powerful they actually were. With how much power these fans draw, I can't just plug them directly into the motherboard without damaging it. Instead, through the power of soldering, I ran power to the fan through a PCIe power cable and connected the PWM and TAC pins to the regular fan header. I also added a switch to disconnect the PWM pin, so at the flip of a switch, I can run the fan at full blast. And with that, the case frame was fully assembled, but it was still missing the most important part of any gaming PC. There we go. That's more like it. The Hot Wheels PC was finished, but I wasn't done yet. I still had one more computer to build. No expenses were spared on the Barbie PC either. I packed the same insane hardware in it as the Hot Wheels PC. But this time, I knew what I was doing, and I had the right tools to get it done. While my Barbie computer setup may only have 2 monitors and no steering wheels, it's got a few exclusive accessories of its own, like a matching printer. I also have 2 cameras for a multicam stream setup, along with a huge backlog of all the classics. But something was still missing from these setups. As great as mouse and keyboard is, some games just aren't the same without a controller. I gave both the Barbie gamepad and the Barbie PC Pro Pad a try, but they were honestly not the best. What I really wanted was a modern, custom controller to match one of my setups. But as returning viewers know, painting is not one of my strengths. Instead, I reached out to Spicy Frog, one of the best controller painters I have ever seen. She wanted in, but now we had to decide, what was the controller going to be? Xbox or DualSense? Barbie or Hot Wheels? After putting a lot of thought into it, we knew there was only one real answer. All of the above. Spicy Frog did an amazing job with these controllers. I sent her pictures of the computers and told her to do her thing. With complete creative control, she went above and beyond, and I couldn't be happier with how they turned out. So if you're looking for a custom painted controller, be sure to check out Spicy Frog. Finally, it was the moment we've all been waiting for. It's time to crank some settings and play some games. I used NVIDIA Surround to effectively turn the 3 monitors into a single 3072 by 768 60Hz ultra-wide display. While that resolution may sound kinda low, CRTs have the ability to make modern games look amazing at lower resolutions. They even have some distinct advantages over modern, top-of-the-line gaming monitors.
I will say, high refresh rate on a CRT looks better than every single LCD ever made, period, in motion. And I stand by that.
Gaming on CRT monitors like these is unironically an amazing experience. Running at lower resolutions means I can crank the settings to the max without sacrificing frame rate. With DLSS off, RTX on, and settings cranked to the max, the Hot Wheels PC smoked any benchmark I threw at it. And for those wondering, yes, it runs Doom. And Doom. And Doom. And Doom. And Doom. And of course, Doom. And Crysis. While the setup looks great, it didn't sound great. Thanks to the fan, this PC sounds like a leaf blower. Well, these plastic speakers did have a bass button that boosts the lower frequencies to try to make it sound more full. It just couldn't compete. So I was very excited when I discovered there was actually a beefier, premium set of Hot Wheels speakers made. But then I noticed something on the front, and I knew I had to make it happen. And thus, the Hot Wheels subwoofer was born. Now the PC can finally sound as obnoxious as it looks.
What do you think of Mako soldering?
It's a Mako.
On the Barbie setup, I only had 2 matching monitors instead of 3. So I took a different approach that gave me 1 high-resolution screen and 1 120Hz screen. Gaming at high refresh rates was awesome, but what I really wanted was more screens. I didn't have any more Barbie monitors, but I had the next best thing, a Disney Princess CRT. Sorry, did I say a Disney Princess CRT? I meant 4 Disney Princess CRTs. And through the power of wasting sponsorship money on retired professional AV equipment, I was able to unite these tubes into a single 3x2 CRT wall. But I still wasn't satisfied. 6 monitors wasn't enough. I needed more. There we go. That's more like it. But looking back at this stock-looking Hot Wheels PC, I thought to myself, what if it wasn't a sleeper? What if I fully embraced the horrors of aftermarket car mods? Is it even possible to make this build even more obnoxious? The answer is always yes. Spinning rims, carbon fiber wing, a flame-grilled exhaust pipe, and of course, simulated head gasket failure. This video has been a series of dumb ideas, but there's one idea I have left that is just too dumb for me to do on my own, and it involves the fact that the 3090 is a half-length card. So Linus, if you're out there and want to help make this dumb idea a reality, I've got a present for you. Hit me up. This video was by far the most expensive project I have ever taken on this channel, and I couldn't have done it without Micro Center. They gave me the budget to make this project exist and the creative freedom to make it the way I wanted to. If you live close to one of their stores and are even remotely into computers, you should definitely check them out. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed, liked, and shared my videos with their friends. I genuinely read as many of the comments as I can, and I love how supportive they have been thus far. It really does make a difference and helps keep me motivated to take on bigger and more ambitious projects. I go all in on my projects and videos so they can take many months to complete. Although I only upload a few times a year, I work really hard to make each video special. I have many upcoming projects in the pipeline I'm extremely excited about. You can find teasers on my Discord server, Twitter, and Instagram. And last but not least, I'd like to thank my patrons for their continued support. Y'all are awesome. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next project.